So my name's Eamonn. I work at Techstars and a bunch of other accelerators around the world, helping businesses to launch and helping them to scale and helping them to do a whole bunch of other things. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is this Irish guy standing up here with a cup of coffee in a weird plastic bag? The answer is there are prizes in the plastic bag, so if I ask questions, answer them. Right, there's Haribo in there, right? It was a late night for some people. The reason I'm up here is I love computers. So some people may recognize, does anyone know what this is? Yeah. Okay, so the first person who gets a packet of teeth, right? No comment on anyone's age. So this was my first love. This is a Sinclair Spectrum, a 48K computer, so people are probably wearing glasses that have more memory than this computer had. But this is what I learned how to write code on. So back in the 1980s in Ireland, you could buy tapes and you could play games off it, or you could buy magazines and you could handwrite the code in and execute it and play games in that way. And so I used to write games using this computer, and I used to name them after girls that I liked, which was a strategy was a singular failure. Like being an entrepreneur nowadays is cool, right? In 1983 in Dublin, not so much, right? But I've always loved games, and I've always been interested in games and always been interested in the internet. And so I started my first company 10 years ago, and it was a spectacular failure. I like to blame the Irish economy. The reality is it was kind of me. But we'll gloss over that, and we'll talk about successes now, because that's way more fun. So I started a company in Dubai, as was mentioned earlier. So about 5 years ago, started a company doing mobile travel guides for the region in Arabic and in English. So this is one that we did with Roshan, which was the first travel guide to Kabul. So we worked with Roshan and a couple of other partners. We did travel guides to Dubai, to Doha, to Riyadh, to a whole bunch of different cities around the region. And my partners bought me out, and eventually a publishing company bought out that business in Dubai. And then I came back, and this happened. So how many people here played Farmville? Okay, so like 5 honest people in the audience, right? Like 95% of you are fucking lying. So loads of people played Farmville, right? It was a very annoying game that was incredibly popular on Facebook in 2010. And it was very annoying for a whole bunch of reasons, right? If you wanted to do anything on it, if you wanted to plant crops, if you wanted to harvest crops, if you wanted to engage with the game in any way, typically you had to nominate your friends to help you out. And what that led to was this, right? So you would get loads and loads and loads of updates, and your entire Facebook newsfeed would be filled with people going, I've harvested my crop, I've planted strawberries, I've done all of these kind of different things. And it was incredibly annoying, like incredibly annoying. And not to conform to national stereotypes, but a bunch of friends and I sat in a bar one night talking about how annoying it was. And we weren't the only ones who hated it, right? So lots and lots of people were putting stuff like this up on the internet because they were getting spammed so much. And we thought there must be a solution to this. There must be a way to game the game. And so we came up with Farmvillain, which was a parody of Farmville. And basically what it allowed you to do, in this case, you could give your neighbor's cows mad cow disease. You could salt the earth on their land. You could burn down their barns. You could do all of these kind of horrible things to them. And we coded it and launched it as a joke, which turned out to be extremely funny in the end. And so what happened was we launched it and sent it to 10 of our friends. And we thought, you know what, this is never going to go anywhere. It's just a bit of a laugh. And so we checked it about a week after we launched it, and there were about 1,000 people using it. And we figured that's the kind of scale that it's going to get to. About 2 weeks later, I went to the supermarket, and I went to pay for my groceries. My card got declined. So I went back in, and I looked at my bank account, and I'd had a huge amount of money taken out by our hosting provider. I thought, I wonder what this is. So I went in, and we had 100,000 people using it. I was like, shit, we better put some ads into this. So we put ads in that paid for the hosting bill, and they suddenly started generating actually quite a lot of money. And we started putting a little bit more effort into it, writing new stories, building a community on Facebook. So in a couple of weeks, we went from 0 to 100,000 followers on Facebook, and loads of fans on Twitter, and various different things. And by doing, with no marketing spend at all, just kind of viral marketing and word of mouth, we got it to 1 million people playing it every day within 8 weeks of launching it. And so it became a phenomenon. We were in the media back home, which was great. It proved to my parents that I actually did have a job. We were called the South Park of Facebook. We were featured in Kotaku. We were featured in games blogs, all of these various different things. And eventually we were bought by GameStop because they wanted the traffic. We can talk about how horrible that experience is. So anyone here who's thinking about, oh, an acquisition is amazing, it's not. Right, it's way less fun than it feels like, especially when you have to go and work for someone else. But Farmvillain was a phenomenal success, and so since then I've gone on and so these are some of the stories that you could do on there. Add more cowbell to your farm and various different things. Yeah, You can probably get a sense of my sense of humor from this. It's not very adult. So I subsequently went and worked for a network called Keep, which is a rewards network for games and apps. I met them when they were 6 people, and I opened up Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, and hired our salespeople and set up the operations in this part of the world for Keep for a couple of years, and now sit on their advisory board. So I have loads of experience of kind of dealing with big companies and doing various different things, and this is what I do now. So obviously Techstars takes up a chunk of my time. I work with a whole bunch of different businesses there across London and Berlin. I sit on a couple of boards. So Lingvist is a former Techstars company that is a language learning tool. Keep, obviously, I mentioned. Brandwatch is a social media monitoring tool that's very big in the UK. And Sorry as a Service is a company currently going through Techstars that worked with Eric, who you may have seen yesterday. And so collectively, you know, through this, I've worked with companies that have raised somewhere in the region of $200 million. So I've gone through every stage of the fundraising process, from seed through now Series D, and the pain associated with that, and kind of understand the acquisition ecosystem. So I have a reasonable, I guess, understanding of this world. So do feel free to ask me anything later on. But I want to talk about a couple of things, right? The expectation when everyone starts a company is it's going to be this hockey stick, right? You're going to launch and suddenly something is going to happen and everyone is going to use your app or everyone is going to use your product, right? The reality is very different. It's a little bit more like this, which will hopefully very slowly progress across the screen. Here we go, yes. The tech crunch of initiation, right? So everyone buzzes about you and you get loads of users, and then, right, the wearing off of novelty, where people start forgetting about you. The trough of sorrow, where you start feeling sorry for yourself. Wiggles of false hope, where you get kind of anomalous downloads from bots, right? And eventually maybe you hit the promised land and you have the acquisition of liquidity and your upside. But the reality is most businesses fail, unfortunately. And so it's a tough process to go through, but it's not all bad. So this was one of the first sites on the World Wide Web, which is like 22 years ago now, in 1993. And in my mind, you think we're 22 years on from the start of the internet, and we're 8 years on from the launch of the iPhone. So we're still in relatively early stages of mobile technology, we're in really early stages of blockchain technology, we're in super early stages of Internet of Things technology, and we're in really, really early stages of hardware technology. And the cost of doing all of these things is coming down and down and down over time. So it's not all bad news. There is a lot to be hopeful about. So I wanted to tell you a couple of things to talk about or think about, and then feel free to pitch me. Take notes. Always have whether it's Evernote or an actual physical notebook with you. One of the most useful things that I do is hear interesting stories and just make notes of them. I make notes in my Kindle, I make notes in the margins of books, I make notes in a notebook, I make notes in Evernote. Always, always, always making notes of things that occur to me, because you forget stuff all the time, right? Read all the time. How many people here have read a book in the last month? Okay, the next time I come and ask this question, everyone's hand should be up. How many people here have read a book in the last month that wasn't related to what they're doing? Okay, way more hands should be up, right? The most interesting people are people who are interested in a lot of things, right? And so if all you do is read about stuff that you're already doing, that's actually quite boring. You'll be a very poor dinner party guest. So read lots. It's not just books. Read articles, right? Read Reddit, read Hacker News, read TechCrunch, read tech.eu, read all of the blogs that are out there, because even the people who comment on them, and some of them are pretty horrible, occasionally say things that are useful. So read all of the time. Talk to people. How many people here, and this question has been asked before, so I'm laboring the point, how many people here have an idea that is so amazing that if they told someone, that person would steal it immediately? Eric, I know your idea already, right? Talk to people. So I made this mistake, right? The first couple of companies I had, I was like, this idea is so amazing that if I tell anyone the secret sauce, you know, they'll just steal it immediately. And the reality is, right, there are already 10 people working on every idea that you guys are working on, and they're all smarter than you are, right? And they're probably all further along than you are. And that's not a damning condemnation of you guys. That's the reality that you have to think about, right? So you have to talk to people all the time. And this has been an amazing experience, because so many people are coming up and pitching us all the time. When you do talk to people, make sure that when they talk back, you listen. It's extremely, extremely rude and annoying if I'm telling you something and you're clearly not paying attention, or you try and interrupt me. And it's not because, I mean, everyone has a little bit of an ego, but frequently if I'm trying to give you good advice, the polite thing to do is figure out a structured way to accept that. And the best way to do that is to listen to what I'm saying. In your business, scratch itches that you have. So the single best thing that I can see for businesses when they come to pitch me or when they come to pitch Techstars is when someone goes, this is a problem that I had in my daily life. This is a problem that I identified through my own pain point, right? So scratch itches that people have. Figure out a competitive advantage. right? What's the thing that makes you better than everyone else out there? If you come to me and you say, I've got this amazing piece of, this idea for, you know, a piece of software that's going to transform the legal profession, and I say, well, what do you do? It's like, well, I did journalism in college. I was like, well, okay. Do you have any lawyers on your team? No. Whereas if someone comes to me and goes, I have an idea for something that could transform the legal profession, I need help to find a coder, and you go, well, what do you do? I'm a lawyer. I'm way more likely to give you my time as a result, right? Because you can get access to that market way, way quicker. So think about your unfair advantage. Does it pass the grandparent test? This is ageist, unfortunately, but here we go. If you can't explain what you do to your mom, your dad, your grandparents, someone who's not involved in this industry, they're unfortunately called civilians sometimes, but not by me, then you're screwed, right? Always assume that investors know a little bit less about your industry than you do, so explain things really simply, and this was touched on earlier, right? Don't use management speak, don't do all of those things. Don't pitch me, don't pitch me. I'm probably not going to invest in the businesses that are here today. Instead, ask me questions. How can I apply to Techstars? What are the things that stop companies from getting investment? Ask me open questions that I can give you a valuable answer to. Right, don't pitch me because I'll just go, oh, okay, switch off. If you ask me questions where I can give you some help, that's useful. So, right, ask open questions, really, really important. How can I do this? The way that we used to open every sales meeting and keep was go in and go, what are the 3 things that keep you awake at night and how can I solve them? Right? And it was amazing. It got an amazing result. So, can I do this? How do you fix this problem at the moment? What do you think of when you see X, right? Ask open questions. Lose your shame, right? This dog pukes under the bed. So you've got to lose your shame because you've got to go out and you've got to talk to a lot of people to validate your idea, right? One of the best pieces of advice I saw for apps that are targeting consumers is take the wireframes or the early mock-ups of your app, go to a bus stop, don't put the logo of the app on there, and go to a bus stop and show people the application that you're building. And if anyone stops you at the end of that demonstration and goes, what's that called? You've got a product that people want. Right? So lose your shame, go out and talk to people. Here are reasons not to be ashamed. This is what Google looked like when it launched, right? It's fugly. Here is what Facebook looked like when it launched. It is really ugly. Here is what Yahoo looked like now. It's still ugly. Does anyone here work for Apple? Yahoo, sorry. This is what the Apple website looked like, right? Like Johnny Ive's worst nightmare. So the first version of things is always bad. This is a great piece of advice. You're not embarrassed by the first version of your product you've launched too late, right? You've probably all heard this before. But don't be ashamed, right? Use all the feedback you get to an aha moment. There should be an aha moment in every product. So with Facebook, they realized that once you had 7 friends, you were way more likely to come back in and engage. With Dropbox, once you had uploaded a file and shared it with someone else, you were way more likely to come back in and re-engage. So find your aha moment in your product. The aha moment is the piece where someone goes, this is amazing, I better come back and use it tomorrow. Right? That's how your retention rate increases, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when you do, don't be afraid to change. Now, here is a question for a packet of Haribo. What is this app? No, Naz, sorry. No. Yeah, who said, okay, who said Instagram first? Yeah. I'd throw it, but let's leave it up here because aim is perhaps not perfect. So this is a very generic app called Bourbon, which is very similar to Gowalla and Foursquare. So you could check into locations, you could share that with your friends, et cetera, et cetera. It was launched by 2 guys called Kevin and Mikey. And what they found was everyone was already using Gowalla and Foursquare. And so the app was a bit of a failure, right? They couldn't scale it outside of their group of friends. But what they did notice was the one thing that people were doing was they were taking photographs on the app. They were applying some of the filters that they had made available to put on those photographs. Then they were taking photographs of the screen and sharing those photographs somewhere else. And they thought, you know what, this filtering thing is kind of interesting. It makes everyone's photographs look so nice that they want to share them everywhere. And so they thought, perhaps we should just build an app that allows you to put filters over your photographs and make you look like a better photographer, right? What happened 13 months later? Yeah, fucking $1 billion happened to them 13 months later, right? It became Instagram a couple of weeks afterwards, and then they sold it to Facebook, right? So there's a whole bunch of companies that have discovered something by accident and launched it, right? Does anyone remember a company called Odeo? O-D-E-O? Okay? Yeah. So Odeo pivoted and became Twitter, right? So don't be afraid to change. Danger Will Robinson, here are things to remember. Places to get noticed. I was asked to talk about fundraising and getting on people's radar. Like, talk to all of these people. Product Hunt is probably, how many people here use Product Hunt? Okay, so more hands should go up the next time I ask. Product Hunt is the best place to find interesting new things. It is where half of the VCs in the world spend their days. It outsources their thought process. So go on Product Hunt, launch your product on there. Go on AngelList. If you're raising funding and you're not on AngelList, you don't exist, as far as I'm concerned. Go on all of these places and find people who are doing things that are similar, right? Product Hunt will help you populate your competitor slide really quickly. Hacker News will allow you to get occasionally unpleasant feedback. Tech.eu, TechCrunch, any of the, WAMDA, any of the kind of local media to you, get press coverage. It'll help you get noticed. When you're sending stuff out to people, if you're sending me a slide deck, spell check it, right? Spell check your slide decks, because if you don't, I'm going to think you're lazy. And I know that's an unfortunate thing to think, but that's reality, right? I skim over things and think, okay, well, if you can't be arsed to spell check your presentation that you're sending to me, like when you're pitching to an angel investor, you're asking them to give you money that they could otherwise spend on a holiday or a watch or a boat or a car or something else. And so if you go, I can't even be arsed to spell check this document before I send it to you, they're going to go, well, that's going in the bin, and I'm going to buy a whatever, Rolex. I don't know what people wear nowadays. Like a gold Apple Watch, right? That's how dumb a lot of these people are. So spell check what you send out. Get a lawyer. So I was sued by Chuck Norris, which is not a pleasant place to be. We had a Chuck Norris character in Farmville, and his IP guys didn't appreciate it. And then we were like, oh, maybe we should offer him some equity in the company. And they were like, just take Chuck out of the game. I was like, okay. And we got an email. So here's a quote. We got an email from Apple. They were like, yeah, this really needs to come out, right? This is going to be a problem. And at the end, it was like, you should know by now, don't fuck with Chuck, right? Get a lawyer. A lawyer is really important. You need to go through a whole bunch of different things. You may fall out with your co-founder. You may have a terrible experience. You may not necessarily know what you're doing. Get a lawyer, draft agreements, get everything in writing. Speaking of falling out with co-founders, I've done it on many occasions. We've, on average, on Techstars, have one co-founder breakup every program. Sometimes they're spectacular. Sometimes they're really spectacular. One way to avoid this, how many people know what vesting is? Okay, vest your shares over time. If you don't know what it is, look it up. I can't go into the legalese of it now, but effectively it means that if you own 70% of the company, you don't get it on day one. It vests over a 2, 3, 4 year period. Do that with your co-founders. Get legal agreements in place. Go to seedsummit.org. 500 startups have KISS documents. Y Combinator have documents that you can use. Templated documents that allow you to enter into agreements with your co-founders, with your advisors. They have templated term sheets. They have all of this kind of stuff there. Make sure you put vesting in, because the last thing that you want is to have a co-founder who you fall out with who has 30% of your business forever, right? At least if they vest, you can kick them out and take all that equity back. Target people, and target the right people. So AngelList is an incredible place to find investors who might invest in your business. If you're going to target people, find people who've invested in similar sectors before, find people who've invested in similar geographies before. If you're going to connect with people on LinkedIn, if you send me a request and I don't know you and it just says, hi, I'd like to add you to my professional network on LinkedIn, delete, right? If you say, hi, we met at Startup Istanbul, I'd like to add you to my professional network on LinkedIn, accept. Right? If I don't know you and you send me this, automatic delete. And that's not just me, right? I'm not an asshole. That's a lot of people will do that. Target the right people. So if you come to me and say, oh, will you invest in my business? We do XXX in geography that I've never even been to. Probably won't invest in that business. If you approach American investors to invest in a business in Turkey, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, and any of these places, they probably won't invest because most of them wouldn't be able to find it on a map, right? UK investors will typically invest in UK businesses because there are tax breaks that exist for them to do that. And that's why the seed stage investment process is much easier in the UK. US investors will invest in US businesses because they can get on a plane and go and see them without any difficulty, right? So people tend to invest in their own backyard. So if you're targeting people, make sure you're targeting the right ones. Remove friction. And this is an equation for friction. This is my inner nerd. Make it really easy for me to say yes to you. So answer loads of my questions in your deck. Answer loads of my potential questions in the email that you reply to me with when I express interest. So if I say, yeah, this sounds interesting, let's maybe get on Skype and talk about it in a couple of weeks. Reply to me and go, yeah, that'd be great. The most common questions we're being asked at the moment are 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is what the answer is, right? So make it really easy for me to get on a call with you and go, how much money do you want? And how much are you raising at? Right? Remove friction from the process. Don't have a complicated legal structure. Don't own a second business that I only find out about slightly later on. Don't do any of these things that make me go, this seems a bit fucked. Right? Remove friction from the process. Soft circle. How many people know what soft circling is? Okay. Soft circling is where you talk to an investor and they go, that's really interesting. I like it a lot. Let's explore this a little bit more. And then you say, can I say that you're soft-circled for 100K or 50K or whatever else, right? And what that means is they've made a soft commitment to invest, right? You haven't got a term sheet, you haven't got any legals, you haven't got anything else, but they've said, I'm sufficiently interested in this that I'm willing to say I'm interested. When you go and talk to other investors then and you go, we've got Mr. X soft-circled, right? We've got Mr. Y soft-circled. It generates momentum. It shows that you're actually doing something interesting. So ask investors if you can soft-circle them really early, not too early in the conversation, but where they've kind of had one or two conversations, or they're like, you know what, like I'd like to take a look at your accounts, or I'd like to do a bit of due diligence, et cetera, et cetera. See if you can soft-circle them earlier, because it just makes you look more credible. The best way to get investment is to have someone else who already wants to invest in you, right? And if you can kind of generate a little bit of momentum or make people feel jealous, you can do that. Here is a wall of text, which I've probably told loads of you not to do, but some final thoughts, and then you can ask me some questions, right? Flatter people's egos. If you're sending emails to potential sales partners, if you're sending emails to investors, if you're frankly sending emails to anyone, especially journalists, investors, and business partners, flatter their ego, go, oh, hey, I really enjoyed that article you wrote the other day. Really enjoyed your blog post on Medium. We're doing X that is incredibly similar, right? Really short emails that just kind of go, you're amazing, and that's why I want to talk to you. You're smart, that's why I want to talk to you, right? Flatter people's egos. They love it, right? We're all animals at the end of the day. How many people here use mail merge to do sales? So you send out the same email to 1,000 people? You might as well just take a hammer and smash your computer now. Don't use mail merge, and don't use templated emails, especially if you're a B2B business. You maybe only have 500 companies in the world that you need to email. Don't send them all the same email. Send them something that's a little bit more personal. Oh, hey, I see you have this problem. I read this article the other day about your business. We're providing solution X that is going to solve Y for you. This is how I'm going to help you sleep more at night. Right? This is how I'm going to remove friction from your life. Make it as easy as possible for people to say yes when you're selling something or when you're pitching for an investment, right? Make it easy to do discounts if you're doing sales, do proof of concepts. If you're doing investment, have a non-complicated legal structure in place, be in a jurisdiction that people can easily invest in. If you're raising, don't talk about the valuation until you have to. Tell people how much money you're raising. Don't tell them how much you're raising at, and never, ever tell them how much of the company you're willing to give away. So never say we're raising 100K for 10% of our business, because that's like... what do they call it in carnival world? Like a rube, right? It's like a rube walking into the room, or a pigeon, whatever they call it. So don't talk about your valuation until you absolutely have to. Talk about how much money you're raising, and then when the conversation gets serious, you go, well, we're raising 100K at 100. How many people know the difference between pre-money and post-money valuations? Okay, everyone should know the difference between that. If you're investing, investors will look for your pre-money valuation, which is the amount of money that you're valuing the company at before their money goes in. So think about your pre-money and your post-money valuation. Ask about soft circling. Getting first commitments is really important. And the most important thing in the world, which probably should be on a slide on its own, is don't be a dick, right? Don't be unpleasant. Don't be short. Don't be unnecessarily over-talkative with people. Don't do things that will make me think that you're an unpleasant person. If I'm investing in your business, or if I'm partnering with you in a business, if I'm buying your product, I'm kind of getting married to you for like 5 to 7 years, right? That's the horizon that you've got to look at in terms of your business being successful, or going towards an exit, or going towards a public listing, etc. Right? Like, no one wants to be in a marriage with someone who's unpleasant for 7 years, because I've got to go and hang out with you at least once a month, maybe for a board meeting. We've got to have a lot of conversations. We're going to have a lot of talks, good times and bad times. And if you're unpleasant, I will find a way to say no. That's it for me. Please ask me anything. That's me on Twitter as well if you want to ask me any questions. But thank you for your attention. Hopefully that was somewhat useful. And there's a pack of Haribo up here with your name on it.
It's good that we didn't throw it. So any questions? Because this is kind of, there are a couple of themes that every speaker is telling, because that's kind of the common sense. But the problem with common sense is it's not so common for people or for starters. So you need to build it. That's why it's really, really tremendously helpful for you to kind of digest those information, especially on fundraising, those of you who are fundraising. All right, great. Any dying questions? All right, no. Thanks so much.
So they supply sorries as a service. So big companies don't do apologies very well. So, telcos always screw up, and banks and all these kind of different people, and especially startups. And when they're scaling up, it's very difficult to scale up that kind of personal touch service. And so they outsource that process effectively. So they work with TransferWise, they work with a bunch of others. And if you have a bad experience with TransferWise or Airbnb or whatever else, they'll send you handwritten letter, chocolates, cookies, flowers, et cetera, to go, look, we're really sorry. And so they have a massive ROI. So you can see, okay, if you send someone a 10 quid box of chocolates, their lifetime value increases about 3.5x. Right, so really impressive business, very, very Estonian company doing it.
Yeah, it's usually.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great talk.